I'm not ashamed to admit it that I was listening to groups like Plus One, who is the
And Plus
contemporary
One. Wow.
boy
Boy
band,
bands,
Christian music boy band.
Christian Backstreet Boys. I actually saw them live one time at a festival.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one dude. It was raining. The
Wow.
dude slipped in one of the dances.
Wow, that's
a bad deal.
I've
never slipped on stage, at least.
I did. Yeah, no, I've only almost fallen off a step. My foot went off, and I lost my balance, but I caught myself, thankfully.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the WIN meeting, Andrew.
Thank you.
And it's kind of, you've been to a few WIN meetings now with our staff, but not that many, quite honestly.
No. In fact, probably at best 16 weeks-ish.
Yeah, not
about.
a ton. Yeah.
No.
So, and you were gone back to California, like one of those at least.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, that's great to have you. You are a new team member here on staff. So, for the folks that maybe don't know who you are, tell them a little bit about yourself and why you're here and why we're yakking and
sure, yeah,
why you're in Texas and all those things.
Yeah, no. So I am originally from California, from Fresno, California, specifically. It's very central California, and that's where I met my wife, where we started our family, and it's where I really found my calling into worship ministry. And when we were living in LA, that was where God put it on my heart that, hey, you've got this gifting, this talent. I appreciate that you're so creative and you want to go after things like film composition and commercial writing in that regards. But, God just kind of kept closing doors like that for me, and really redirecting me towards being a worship leader. And so I've done that for the last almost 15 years now.
Yeah.
And, just the circumstances being what they were, I was in transition from my last church, and God connected me to you, and got to come and visit you guys back in October of last year. And me and my wife...
It does not feel like it's been that long.
I know.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's flown by.
It really has. And me and my wife enjoyed the trip so much.
Hold on.
Oh. You keep hitting the table. I'm sorry.
Okay. We'll start it over.
Okay.
It's all good.
Okay.
I just saw him going like...
Yeah.
It was once or twice, and it just kept going, and you kept going. I was like,
yeah.
no.
I'm resting my hands here. Yep. Just to keep myself like that.
That's why I keep holding on to my own hands down here.
Yeah.
You'll notice that. I keep doing that because if I hold on to myself, then I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong camera. It's not on the middle camera.
It's on me.
So
it's fine.
There we go. All right, we'll start that over. All good though. Well, welcome to the. I'm not going to start with an We're starting over. Welcome to the WIN meeting.
Thank you.
And
happy to be here.
Yeah, it's it's not like you've been to a lot of these.
No.
Obviously not to this one, but even to just our staff WIN meetings, you haven't been to a lot of them. You're pretty new around here.
It's true. Yeah, probably at most 14, maybe 16 of them in my time.
Not very many. Which is great. It's been awesome having you here. Why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah.
Especially since you're new around here, but just in general, like why you're here, why you're in Texas, what brought you all the way this way to Current?
Yeah. So I'm originally from California. I know a lot of people listening here in Texas are like,
excuse me, what?
Super nervous about that.
Click.
But yeah, sorry, our viewership, our listeners have just completely crashed on us. No. So I actually grew up most of my life there, and then did all my education, all that stuff, met my wife there in California, and really got my call to worship ministry over there.
Yeah.
I was trying to get into commercial music writing and film music and composing and stuff like that, and just, one door after another, God just kind of was like, nope, that's not what I created for you. I wanted you to go after God, go after me, and lead worship for the church. And so I was really, really excited to be a part of that. And then just yeah, last October I was in transition from my last church, and God saw fit to connect us, and
Yeah.
got to come and visit back in October of last year, which is crazy. It doesn't feel like that long ago, but
Yeah, it's
it's
flown
been a
by.
while now.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
good.
it's been really cool.
Yeah.
And so, we came, we visited, and like a lot has been said already online about Current, one of the things that attracted us here was like, yeah, we could raise our kids here, we could raise our family here.
Yeah.
And it's not even just, the fact that the congregation has been so incredible, the elders, Darren, everybody's been fantastic. It's also the community around
Yeah.
Current in Katy, Texas, and just the cultural shift from being in California to where everybody's kind of fend for yourself on your own, stand on your own 2 feet, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it also, has its downsides because you're basically saying, sorry, I don't have time for you. My stuff is more important.
Sure.
And then you also have times where, it can seep into your family culture, and that's not always the best thing either.
Right.
And so when we came here, we walked into just local stores and things like that, and we were just truly amazed at just how kind everybody is
Yeah.
around here. And
Yeah.
it was truly a culture shock for us moving here
Yeah.
in that regard. So we're very excited to be here.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. I'm going to rewind just a little bit
Yep.
to give people a little bit of context because you mentioned like film stuff and composing and all those kinds of things, and so like rewind a little bit off that because you have your training and education is to have a master's in music composition. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah.
And so, yeah, like talk about that a little bit, like in a little more detail. You went to college for this. You
Yeah.
were passionate about it.
Yeah.
Something you were hopeful for, but then it changed. And so, what changed in there?
Yeah, so it was kind of twofold. So in my undergraduate, I did vocal performance and composition because a lot of my teachers that I was going to school with in Fresno at the time were pressuring me to, use the God-gifted talent that I had. I had so many people, you should try out for opera, you should try out for Broadway. And
It's always wonderful when other people know exactly what you should do
yes.
with your life and your talents, right?
Yeah, and the thing that I knew about myself was that my weakness was always the theoretical side, and I didn't have that strength in me. Musically speaking, yeah. And so I wanted to shore up that weakness in myself, so I'd focused on composition. And then when I finished that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to find a job. And we were in a recession, and there were no teaching jobs. And I quickly realized as I was doing private studies that I did not enjoy teaching.
So you got into ministry. What a great decision.
Well, almost. I was like, well, maybe I'll apply for my master's degree. That seems like a good idea. And so I went
Not
down
like
to-
teaching, but let's do more schoolwork.
Let's do more schoolwork,
Yeah.
yes. And so I went down to LA and got really excited because I started to make some connections with people, got to meet guys like Mike Watts and Mark Gasparo, guys who worked in the industry for many, many years on things like The Simpsons, working on major motion pictures with people like Michael Giacchino and other composers like that. And it was a really, really cool experience. But as I started to pursue those things more on my own, I just kept getting burned by a lot of people.
Yeah.
I would do some projects that weren't even really that big of a deal. They were like temp tracks, and temp tracks are basically just, giving the director just an idea,
Like something to work
a flavor
off
to
of, right?
work off
Yeah,
of,
yeah, yeah.
knowing that eventually an actual person's going to come through and probably do the whole score anyways.
Right.
And so I was creating those temp tracks, and I would have guys who would just flat out take the music and run.
Yeah.
They wouldn't pay me. And with me
Not
and
a
my
great
wife,
way to support your family.
no. And truthfully, my wife was supporting us that whole time. She
Yeah.
was working full time, working her butt off as a waitress in downtown.
So that led you to considering worship ministry.
Yeah, so God had kind of opened a door for me to work part-time at a church in Buena Park. And as I was working there, I was really enjoying what I was doing. And I was working with musicians who were very different from me. They'd only grown up sight reading music, playing by ear. And so God almost forced me into a teaching mode. And it got me into a creative space to where I wasn't expecting to be as far as teaching was concerned. But I enjoyed leading worship so much, and I felt God feeding my soul through that because I wasn't getting my soul fed in any other context outside of that. And by the end of it, we just it's been funny how God works. He's just kind of said, all right, it's time for you to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And it didn't leave on bad terms from that church. It was just like Elaine and I were talking about starting our family. We knew we couldn't afford to live in LA and have kids because at the time they were estimating it cost like $3 million just to raise one kid all the way through high school.
Ministry doesn't pay like that.
No, definitely not.
But does, quite honestly.
No, definitely not. So we moved back up to Fresno where my family was at, got connected with the church that I worked at for 6 years there, and God just continued to pour into me, and I continued to grow and mature, and I'm just very grateful for the journey.
Yeah. I'm curious your thoughts on, because you mentioned like the fulfillment that comes from leading worship, that kind of thing. Maybe talk about that a little bit, because like I said, I'm just curious your perspective. I love having this conversation with fellow worship leaders because, I mean, especially as we're teammates now, but I've got lots of friends who are in this, this world, and it's a little different for all of us, but there is, we call this the win meeting, and there's, there's some really different and I think distinct, unique wins that we get to experience that maybe not everybody does. So yeah, just talk about your experience with that, especially at first.
Yeah.
Like what was the swing? Was like, yeah, this I could. One, obviously you're following God's calling,
Right.
But that thing that clicks in you, like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
For a really long time.
So what clicked for me was the interactions that I would have with people over my career as a worship pastor so far, of them, the light bulb clicking on multiple facets. One, not just the facet of like musical excellence and giving their very best into their musicianship, but also understanding that, it's not about me. It's about the collective us coming together for the sole purpose of magnifying Christ.
Yeah.
And by extension, the congregation getting to be a part of that and feeling led into that as well, and feeling connected. And that is what has, and really what it was that clicked for me was just watching these light bulbs go off in people's heads, like, oh, that's why we do this. Oh, I don't need to obsess over this part at the end of it all. You know, I can just give my very best because this is what my best is right now.
Yeah.
And know that I can try harder for the next time and make it even better for the next time.
Yeah.
And just watching that grace exist in that musicianship world, because I mean, this, the music world, just like it is in film and television, is just highly competitive by nature.
Oh, yeah.
And there's just this constant need to one-up each other or backstab each other. And what I've seen in worship culture is that it can very quickly go that way if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And what I've seen here at Current, and what I've always craved in my life as a worship leader, is to see that just completely disappear.
Yeah.
And that's been non-existent here as far as I've seen in Current, which is just really, really cool.
Well, I do. Yeah, I agree with you. The goal of my favorite thing is hearing everybody else sing. That's just my favorite thing. And there's a few things about, especially, and worship music is a term now that's become synonymous.
Yeah.
But just music that does worship God, that does proclaim His name, that proclaims His truth, and whether it's straight up scripture or songs written around it, or those kinds of things. What it does in people's hearts and minds, but also knowing that God loves music.
Right.
He loves our singing.
Yeah.
And He loves, there's something about that when we get to be part of that.
Yeah.
And part of something that really truly moves His Spirit forward.
Right.
Like I say, getting to be part of that is really, really exciting.
It really is.
And
especially when it goes from, we can stop singing and the congregation is doing it all themselves. That is so cool.
For sure. And I get people that are like, I hate it when you back off of the mic.
I know.
Because then they can hear themselves more.
Right.
That's the point, we love to hear those people sing. And I mean, and like I said, God does too.
Yeah.
But okay, so all that said, that's all really cool. You got into worship ministry, and now you're here.
Yep.
And so, you've been here for like 3 months, something like that, 4 months. Just talk a little bit about your time here, maybe some of the wins you've seen in our team, and and your growth personally, and some of those things.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things for me personally that I've seen is just healing in my own heart and in my own mind. what I can say without being, too specific is when you work this close with church, you see the good and the bad just across the
Well,
board.
just ministry is hard.
It is very hard. It is very hard.
because people are involved, and the relationships get close.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
there's real intimacy, which means
Exactly.
you're connected, and so that means change is hard, and
Right.
and disagreements are even harder.
Exactly.
And even finding agreements can be a challenge.
Exactly. And it gets to the point where, you can run a dangerous line where even for yourself personally, you can get into unhealthy spaces with all of those things and take it a little too personally. And that was definitely me. I took a lot of things.
Well, especially as a musician.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's so, like,
It's a part of who you are. It's your
Yeah.
heart is on your sleeve, basically.
so if somebody says, "Hey, I didn't love that song that we sang on Sunday," it's like, "So you hate me? Thank you. Are you going to call me ugly now too?" It does. It gets that person, and that's not what people mean usually.
Exactly.
But that's what happens.
Exactly. And sometimes you're not always aware that because you're walking into something new and exciting, it's easy to get wrapped up in all of that and feel like you're in a good place.
Yeah.
And the reality is just, we're all sinners saved by grace. And
Right. Yeah.
and like we're gonna hurt each other. We're gonna fail. And so there were some hurts from my previous experiences in church that I was struggling to let go of and give to God. And like what I've told you before and what I've told many people here on staff is that God has, one of the things that God has been doing in my life is intentionally standing in the gap of my hurts. And it's been so powerful to me because it doesn't just extend to, the hurts that I've experienced in Christendom and church and stuff like that, but it's the hurts that I have from even just family life or friends and things like that. God has deliberately shown up and stood in those gaps and said, "Hey, I want to move you from unhealthy to healthy. I want to move you from hurting to healed."
Yeah.
And this move here has been just that. It did come at great expense to me. Elaine and I were really afraid of the cost of not having our family close by and what that
that's
was
a
going to do
huge
for
switch.
us.
Yeah.
Because, we hadn't moved a whole lot for my job. Because I'm relatively young in the game as far as worship leading is concerned, and so this was a big move for us, and it was gonna require us to be able to fully rely on God, and when we saw the opportunity, God was just like closing every other door that we were like, well, what about this one? What about this one? God was like, no, this is where I need you to be.
So we were your last choice, is what you're saying?
No. Actually, what I will say is I was super grateful to God because God did really give me a lot of options. And there was never really a front runner in my mind of who was the best and who was the worst or that kind of thing. It was literally God was saying, no, like the playing field is level, son.
Yeah.
Like you have the choice,
Right.
and I'm going to bless you wherever you go.
Of course, yeah.
And that was more of what I felt when I was looking, because when I first was looking for a job moving from LA, I couldn't find a worship leading job to save my life then. That was before COVID.
Yeah.
And so I was genuinely thinking that I'm never going to find a worship job after this one.
Yeah.
But God really was like, no, I've got you.
Yeah.
So just trust me again. Just
Well,
like
and
you always have.
those faith steps are so important.
Yeah.
In our development, and it's interesting hearing you talk about this because I think, maybe sometimes there's a perception of those of us in leadership or especially in a job like ours where we get to like sing music we like a lot, and love for a living, that there can maybe be a perception that everything's just kind of perfect and great all the time.
We've got it together.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and standing up, and we have smiles on our faces most of the time, and all those things. And there's this at the same time where you're a dude trying to figure it out, and dealing with. You even mentioned, I think there's a lot of people out there that have been hurt by the church in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
Which, the truth is, the church is led by people.
Yep.
And so that's going to be part of it. Unfortunately, like you just mentioned, we're all just a bunch of sinners saved by grace, and hopefully, and that's going to come through. And if we aren't able to find that same kind of grace to share, it can be. That said, it's difficult enough as it is a lot of times, but there are such wins.
Yes.
There are such huge things. Like even just every time. somebody gets baptized in one of our services.
Absolutely.
Every time I see somebody raise their hand singing, every time, we'll have one thing I love about our church. And I'll throw this to you in a second too. I'm curious to. One thing I love is to see it because we'll have like whole families sit like right on the front row.
Yeah.
And there's mom, dad, and kids all the way down, little kids singing, engaged.
Yeah.
Being fully part of this.
Yes.
And I think in a time where a lot of churches choose to, for lots of different reasons, lots of them good.
Yep.
To separate those things out, that
Right.
we have a church family that really is church families.
Yeah.
And to see that play out in a truly multi-generational way, that just really, I love that.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite wins of
Absolutely.
being on stage. So I'm curious, like from, especially you being newer, what's some of your favorite like wins of what we get to experience on a
I
Sunday?
mean, for me, the wins, like doing communion every Sunday, love that.
Yeah.
I love seeing.
Is that different for you?
very
Because
different?
it was way different for me coming here.
Very different. Like I grew up in a Baptist church.
Yeah.
And actually, I have a pretty diverse background when it
Yeah.
comes to Christianity, but most of my time was spent in like a Nazarene Baptist, and then I did spend a predominant part of my time in the Pentecostal church with the Assembly of God. And communion in all of those churches, it's maybe once a month.
Maybe.
Maybe
A lot of times once a quarter. In those,
yeah, or it's only done at Easter and sometime
Easter and
before
Christmas,
Christmas.
maybe. Yeah.
And so coming here, it was very different for sure. But the thing I loved about it the most was the encouragement of everybody to partake of it together and not having it be so formal as, okay, this pastor's going to stand up here and read a couple verses and okay, now let's everybody eat, and which feels very liturgical and very stiff from my experience.
And there's some great stuff about the seriousness and the somberness and
Yes, absolutely.
attention given. I think that's all really important. But
Exactly.
having a culture though too where you can just gather with somebody across the room and pray with them.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't even hardly know them at all.
Yeah.
And-
That's
but-
actually one of my favoriteest
but
things.
uniting
to
around
watch
this thing that
on
pulls us
Sunday
together.
morning is watching some of our pastors deliberately walk across the
Yeah.
room to people that they've seen, or they were like, I really want to pray with this person, or I really want to do this
I
with
love it. And Darren's great about that.
It's very, very cool to watch that. And then to also see that emulated from the congregation itself. It's almost like really like what we hope for every Sunday, that what we model for them gives them permission to say, hey, I want to do this. So that's exciting. But then also on top of all that, to step into a space where it's not just age diverse, but also culturally diverse.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
Like hugely diverse. I remember when we were visiting, you and many others would say, almost 90% of everybody who's in Katy is not actually from Katy.
Right.
They're from a completely different
not from
city.
Katy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's been the case for sure. And it really, like you said, it does facilitate we really do have to rely on one another because we're all basically disconnected from the places we're originally from.
Right.
And we've intentionally come here and we've been drawn here to connect with other people and connect with God. And it's very apparent because you see all of this diversity across our whole congregation worshiping. And it comes through in our worship style as well, because we also have the freedom, which I don't know that a lot of worship leaders would probably be envious of our position, to be able to just, we wake up on a Monday morning and say, yeah, I'm not feeling this song. Like, we're just going to do a different song. Or, I like this song, but I want to only do guitar.
Right.
Like, to be able to have that freedom to just say, from our leadership, if that's where the Spirit's leading you and God's saying, we need to make this statement in this specific way, we have the freedom to do that. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, and even beyond just the freedom, but just encouraged
Exactly.
to be very broad and to not be stuck.
Right.
That's one thing, especially in this world that can happen real easily. Like, we're singing these 20 songs and that's it.
Yep.
And it's got to be this exact style by these exact artists and written within this time frame and whatever, all those kinds of things. And once again, there's purpose behind all that stuff for lots of different churches. That's great. But it is an enviable position to be in to have that freedom and those choices. And we do, when you talk about diversity, we sing from super old hymns to the thing that just got released last week.
Yeah.
And sometimes those things are attached together.
Exactly.
And even with instrumentation and all that kind of stuff, like you said, it's a really exciting thing. And it's like somebody like you, which by the way, I don't even know if we mentioned it, but you have a master's in music composition.
Yep.
And how fulfilling that can be
Oh, hugely.
for somebody who has that kind of background.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of getting to exercise that in my last church because my job initially was to lead the choir and orchestra, but not in the way that I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
And it's way more fulfilling now because it feels like I'm being asked by you or by Chris or Darren or anybody on the team to be like, hey, we want to do this thing. Could you create some kind of musical bed for this, or could you create this musical thing? Like, that was my wheelhouse. That was what like creatively fed my soul. And so being able to do that this last Christmas was just like so cool. I mean, within the first 3 weeks of me being here,
Right.
just,
That's true.
be able to
Real
pull
fast.
that off, it was a really, really cool thing to do because, like that was what I was kind of breeding myself to do when I was in LA for film music. So
Yeah. Did you grow up a musician like as a kid? Like, did you start playing piano as a little kid?
Yeah, I did. So I started playing piano when I was 6 years old, and I actually wrote my first piano piece when I was 8.
Yeah.
I still have all that music.
That's cool.
And then my dad sung Gaither vocal music around me
Yep.
all
Yep.
throughout my childhood. And so, yeah, I spent most of my life growing up.
Did you ever
in
go to any of the
church
Gaither
music.
homecoming concerts?
Actually, funnily enough, I only went to one in my
Yeah.
whole life, and it was, I want to say 3 years ago,
Oh wow.
just before COVID.
Yeah. I grew up similarly. Like, we had a lot of Southern gospel music around our house, and we went to and actually my grandparents, like, they didn't have TV, they didn't have whatever. They had a TV.
They had
VCR,
ACR, right? Yeah.
But then they had stacks upon stacks of the VHS tapes.
Oh yeah, that was my
Gaither
dad's
homecoming
parents
things.
too. Yes,
And
absolutely.
so that was that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
We share that kind of that background.
Mm-hmm.
But there's great foundation there.
Oh, absolutely.
Musically speaking,
Yeah, absolutely.
harmonies and all those kinds of things that you learn and pull from.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it was cool because it gave me the opportunity to kind of expand and, explore other styles. Like, I'm not ashamed to admit it that I was listening to groups like Plus One, who was the
And Plus
contemporary
One. Wow.
boy
Boy
band,
bands,
Christian music boy band.
Christian
and,
Backstreet Boys. I actually saw them live one time at a festival.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one dude. It was raining, and the dude slipped in
Wow.
one of the dances.
Wow,
That's
that's
a bad deal.
I actually
I've
did
never
watch-
slipped on stage, at least.
I did. Yeah, no, I've only almost fallen off a step. Just
Only
my foot
almost.
went off. My foot went off, and I lost my balance, but I caught myself, thankfully.
That's good.
Yeah. But no, it was. I never felt like I was discouraged from my dad or my mom to not listen to other things, which
Yeah.
is why I was really attracted to Michael W. Smith and his piano playing
sure, yeah.
skills. And I was like, or at a very young age, I was confident that I wanted to be just like Michael W. Smith.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Chris Tomlin came along and made guitars cool and in worship music. And then I was,
And the guitar is cool.
and and then everybody wanted the Chris Tomlins of the world,
that's true.
and the Matt
That's
Redmonds,
true.
and I was the dorky guy who could only play the piano. So
Same.
It took
For
me
a
a
long
while.
time.
It took me a while to convince people, like, no, I can lead effectively.
This is really okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. I picked up an acoustic guitar well after. I was a piano player first, for sure. And so, into my kind of worship leading career is like, well, at some point it looks like I'm going to need to learn to do this. So you're right.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that just kind of happened. Talking about like worship music and stuff,
Yes.
who do you like to listen to, and what are you excited about pulling from now? Anybody that if people are listening and wondering where to like find good new worship music, like
Yeah.
what's some of your favorite things to pull from?
Well, so I'm a pretty eclectic guy when it comes to worship stuff. So I really enjoy, if you're looking for something that's going to give you like something to think about when you're leading worship or singing, I really enjoy Sovereign Grace's music because a lot
Yeah.
of their stuff is very deep theologically. You probably won't hear us do a lot of those on Sunday mornings because they're hard to sing from a congregational
Right.
standpoint, but I really love them if for no other reason than being able to sing songs that are very like heady sometimes really soothe my soul.
Yeah.
But in the same regards, I really have loved. We just did it recently. Resurrender by Hillsong. They just released that one. We went back and listened to it, me and my wife, and it was like, wow, this is a really, really good and powerful song.
Yeah.
I really liked Bethel just came out with Holy Forever, I think is what it is. I really enjoy that song. But I also have an ongoing playlist of stuff that ranges from, hymn arrangements, trying to find new hymn arrangements, to even some older songs. I'm blanking on them right now, but I have a really eclectic list of music that I pull from and I just listen to.
Yeah.
But in the same regards, I also take an opportunity from time to time, and I've had worship experiences listening to non-Christian music.
Sure.
I've been blown away by how sometimes I can be listening to a song and it's like I can feel the Holy Spirit moving in me from whatever the words are being said. And that's one of the reasons why, I used to be headed in a direction to where I was like staunchly worship is only this way, and I've come like full circle, so to speak, and started to realize, oh, you know what? No, worship is your whole life, in giving your whole life to God.
And that's part of why it's funny how, because we're like worship pastors, right? That's our title, and but really that means music pastor in most circles. But the best worshiping through music happens when, as an outpouring of what else is happening within your life, right?
Yep.
And maintaining that posture of humility.
Yep.
Throughout, and that's how we can say something like, well, maybe this isn't a straight up worship song, or maybe this wasn't. But when done with the purpose and intentionality of worshiping God in that, and being thankful for what He's doing in you in that, and even just in your life, being present. You've mentioned just the kind of the healing time that you're in right now.
Yep.
That means sometimes worshiping in a lot of brokenness.
Yep.
And a lot of just frustration, maybe even, and whatever that looks like.
Yep.
You could still worship through that, though.
Right.
It's not only always these big, fun, energetic songs. It's not only always, these huge, sweeping moments.
Right.
Many times it's very still and quiet.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it is that too.
Yeah.
It is big and huge and exciting and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And you'll have those, but being able to find the in between,
right,
and stay worshiping and all that stuff is such a big deal.
Yeah.
And but it can be tough, and
for sure,
people to find. So as you find yourself doing that, how do you find that affects how you land on Sundays?
Yeah.
And when you're leading worship, doing your job, but also worshiping yourself, like how do you make that happen?
Yeah. So I would say in the last, now year and a half, the verse that has just been constantly replaying in my mind is 2 Peter 5, verse 6 through 7, which says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, and at the proper time He will exalt you, casting all your anxieties on Him, because He cares for you."
Yes.
And for me, what I have found is every time I step on stage, I'm carrying a lot with me. Like just this last month, my grandmother passed. These last couple of weeks, we've had to, do the typical getting into Texas, getting our driver's licenses, getting our plates and all this different stuff. And so those are added expenses that are beyond your budget or not a part of the normal routine because you're paying a little bit more. And all of those things are on me coming into Sunday, worrying about how my wife is feeling being at home after 10 years of our marriage, working all the time. And worrying about my kids and how they're developing with this ever increasing pressure on the family, unit, and almost like the enemy is just coming after it with, a new vigor that I can't help but just be like, God, like, you're sovereign. You're over all of this. You're in control. Like, I'm not. I cannot try any more than I am in this moment as I'm stepping onto stage to try to, if I'm leading a happy song, be happy, even though my grandmother's passed, or to not be worried when, the finances are getting a little tight. I have to be able to lay those things at His feet and know that he's going to lift me up in that moment, whether it's that moment, because maybe he's not going to. Maybe he wants me to sit in this, because I've heard it said once, you know, we ask God for strength and he gives us trials, right? Like, or we want peace and God gives us chaos so that we would pursue it more. That's kind of what I've noticed in my life, is that sometimes I might say, okay, God, I'm going to be humble here. And God's like, cool, man, I'm really proud of you, but I still need you in this, because I need you to learn something from this.
Yeah.
And I haven't revealed that to you yet, because this is still a process. And so to be able to then realize, all right, all I can do then is cast all of these things on you.
Yeah.
And know that you're doing it because you care for me.
Right. Well, and that's where the joy comes from.
Right.
That's why you can still sing with a smile on your face.
Exactly.
It's not fake.
No.
It's not, right. It's not
No.
genuine at all. It's not any of that stuff. And it's certainly not that everything's perfect or great. Or even just wonderful all the time.
Yeah, I mean, 90% of the time, that's where the smile comes from, is that I'm thinking about that verse and I'm like, oh, that's right, God, you care for me.
Right.
Cool. That's really cool.
And that's a way different smile.
Yes.
Than just like plastering it on and
Exactly.
pretending like it's not the way it is.
Right.
And I think that's a really good picture into some of what happens in us when we're in those moments. I mean, everybody knows this. If you watch any of our service, I cry all the time. Especially when we're singing about the gospel, because but the power of that and of what Jesus does and his care for me in my life, it just lives right there on the surface all the time. And I'm a very visual thinker. And when I think about the cross, and when I think about, and when I think about my sin, when I think these things, it breaks me over and over and over again.
As it should.
But I'm also okay with that, right?
Right,
like
exactly.
And it's also what makes me smile.
Right.
Because in spite of my worst efforts,
right,
God still loves me. God still cares.
Exactly.
And he still loves to hear me sing, and he still loves to hear us lift him up.
Yeah.
And of all the wins, like, there's not much bigger win than that. It's in spite of us.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the whole relationship between us and God. It's so upside down. And that's when we say worship and worship passionately. That's why we should.
Yeah.
There should be no holding back. There shouldn't be anything that pulls you. Who cares if somebody thinks you're being a little too much?
Yeah.
Listen, God sent his son to die for you.
There
is no too much.
Yeah, well, and the psalmist said, make a joyful noise unto the Lord. Like, pursuing excellence is only going to get you so far.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at the perfection of Jesus Christ on the cross and his humility.
Right.
Like, at a certain point, our best efforts are only going to get us so far, and we have to meet Jesus in that moment.
Yeah.
And so even if our worship is noisy.
Right.
And by noisy, maybe it's out of tune.
Yeah.
Maybe it's, I'm whispering. Maybe it's I'm raising my hands. Maybe it's I'm jumping up and down. Maybe it's I'm closing my eyes. It doesn't really matter, because Jesus is meeting us there with his blood and his sacrifice and saying, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you, and I'm blessing this offering and making it so pleasing to God.
Yeah.
Because that is like one of the more astounding things is just how desperately we need Jesus.
And somebody told me one time, this was actually after a night of worship, and I'd gotten sick before that. I didn't have a ton of voice, and by the time I was done, I had almost none. And my friend, and he told me this, his name was Ron, and he said, worship is supposed to be a sacrifice.
Yep.
And if it didn't cost you anything, did you actually worship?
Yeah.
And you can apply that in a lot of different ways, but man, that has never left me. That if it doesn't cost you some pride, if it doesn't cost you some self promotion, if it doesn't cost you a little bit of just self sacrifice, was it really worship?
Right.
Was the humility present?
Yeah.
Did you actually respond to the Spirit, or did you just kind of keep a cap on it?
Yep.
And
you see, I've heard the same thing, but I've heard it said, if following Jesus hasn't cost you anything, then you're doing something wrong.
Should actually look like?
Yeah, exactly.
You're not running that hard.
Exactly.
And you mentioned the song, like that when we introduced it, it was the line that really caught me. Is if you're calling, we're coming. We're not walking, we're running. We're running as hard as you possibly can,
right?
Toward Jesus and toward his will and
Absolutely.
toward who he is. And if that comes out, our heart sprinting
Yes.
after who he is.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we're perfect. That doesn't mean everything's great. That doesn't, but it does look different than just kind of walking along and just kind of hanging back and that's ultimately, and getting back to what brought you here and all that kind of stuff, because we, I had conversation with lots of people, and we've searched for a long time to find the right fit, because we really just believe culturally for this church that we want to create an atmosphere where passionate pursuit of Jesus is like encouraged and excited about, but is really just, it's also the expectation, almost, right?
Yeah.
Not from us,
Yes.
but that's what God expects of us.
Right.
Like, this is the relationship he wants. He wants it to be crazy big and super intense and very intimate and all in.
Yes.
And that should be evident in our lives, the way we love people, the way we sing, the way we, the way we go about our days. And being part of that is, this is my 7th year. I've been here for 6 full years, and being part of that as it grows and continues is just really awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm excited that you being here knew it's not just me. It's not just me like thinking that's the case.
No, absolutely not. And I definitely agree with you. I that was one of the reasons for me personally I came here, was because I knew that it wasn't just, I loved the values that Current had recently started, really grinding into their staff and really putting as a part of their core, why we exist, why we do what we do. On top of that, also putting things into play like Action, Transformation, Celebration, and just seeing how that every single week it plays out. Every single Sunday, Action, Transformation, Celebration. It just continues to happen. We get to worship, Darren sends a message, and the action is, guess what? You get to decide to follow Jesus. And then you get transformed because you get baptized.
Right.
But then on top of all that, we get to celebrate as a family with you because you've made that decision.
Yeah.
And seeing that play out every single week so far has been just really, really special.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for where we're going now that I get to be here and be a part of the team and contribute as best I can.
Well, and that cycle just keeps going.
Exactly.
And as we continue to act on response to what God is telling us, convicting us from, and into, he keeps changing us.
Yep.
And then we keep celebrating the changes.
Yeah.
And then he keeps changing us more as we keep responding to him. And I think maybe that's part of what people miss when we say action, transformation, celebration. Like, the action is response to him. He's knocking at your door. He's poking you in the heart. He's pushing you to be more than what you are.
Exactly.
As a Christ follower.
Yeah.
And respond to it. Don't wait, man. Run. When Jesus calls,
exactly.
I'm there.
100%.
And that's why I feel like when God brings us a new song, or when God brings us, that's why I get like giddy about this new. We're going to be introducing a new song. Actually, by the time this comes out, we'll have already been singing it for a little bit. But this is our God.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about this song.
Yeah.
And when God laid it in my lap of hey, and it's not quite audible, but it's one of those this is the one.
Yep.
This is the next one, and you get so excited about it, and to be able to just declare to the world this is our God. This is who He is.
Yes, absolutely.
This is who we worship.
Right.
Don't be confused. Don't get it twisted around what the world might try to make Him to be or make us to be just because of who we are as whether it be a title or just knowing you're a Christian or a Christ follower.
Right.
That we are not scared of declaring of who our God is, and we're gonna I'm super excited about that
for sure.
What's some of the stuff you're excited about coming up? Because we have some plans.
Yeah, we got some plans. I'm definitely excited about that song. I'm also excited about another song we're going to do, which is He Lives, which is to declare that, God is actually alive. He's not dead,
Right, it's not just a thing that happened.
No, I mean, I'm reminded of like Paul in Corinthians when he was saying, hey guys, God is who He says He was. He did die on a cross. He did raise from the dead. And there were people who were actively telling him, nah, Jesus didn't do that. And that's still happening today.
Yeah.
And so it really is important for us to keep reminding everyone around us, no, God, Jesus, God, Holy Spirit are alive.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about that. But the other things I'm excited about is things that we've talked about during our Vision Night, things like doing pop-up worship events in our community, doing our nights of worship and getting those up and running so that we can be a part of that. I'm also excited because this is the first time for me experiencing it. Summer circles. I've been hearing
Oh, yeah,
such
yeah.
great things about summer circles, not just from the worship side of things, but just from the over the summer, getting people together and
Yep.
having them still feel connected. Because we know this, that in church, summertime kind of slows down for us because
Oh, yeah, yeah.
families are taking trips, and even we're going on family vacations and stuff like that. And so it can kind of feel like a lull, but. Everything that I've heard from people here on staff and from the people in the church is like summer circles is just a really cool experience for families and the church and the congregation to get together and encourage one another over the
Yes.
summer and not feel like they've disconnected for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Shifting gears a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you as a new Texan, I'm curious to hear what are some of the things you, first talk to you about your family a little bit too. Like,
Yeah.
because you've got a son and a very new daughter.
Yes.
And what are some of the things, just not church,
Yes.
real life, regular life, whatever
Yep.
you want to call it, real life, that it's all real life.
It's all real life. Yeah.
Yeah, what are some of the things that you've loved as you've gotten here? And you talked a little bit about community stuff, but
Yeah,
then
yeah.
stuff you guys are excited about coming forward.
Yeah, I know Elaine and I are very excited about our life group and getting connected into our
Yeah.
life group.
I said non-church things.
Sorry.
No, but this is the truth. Like, ideally, life group isn't really a church thing. It's
It
way
really-
more than that.
no, it definitely has been.
Right, you sign up here, you get you connect
Exactly,
here, but
exactly.
it carries way beyond that.
No, definitely. And so getting connected in that regards, mostly because it's just really great to, like you said, connect outside of
Yeah.
The church and also connect beyond just, oh, hey, we hang out with the staff people and
Yes.
we're really good friends with those people,
Yes.
but to also be connected with the congregation is really cool. So yeah, I've got a son, Frederick. He is 3 years old and currently being potty trained, which is our current challenge right now, and it's not been going well. Lena's got some pretty significant horror stories just recently.
Oh.
And I will not embarrass my son here on this podcast.
Good, because this will live on for a long time.
Exactly.
You don't want this to come back around.
Exactly. And then we have my baby girl, Evelyn, and she is 7 months old. And, she is, she's just developing this personality of
Yeah.
her own, screaming and giggling and all this different stuff. And it's just so cool to watch her grow.
Yep.
And then my wife, Elena, we've been married for 10 years just this last month. And
Yep.
what we've been loving as a family is actually getting to go to the Houston Zoo. My son loves the zoo, loves seeing the animals, loves being able to crawl into all these different spaces
Yeah.
that they have there. That's been a real blast. We got to go to the Houston Children's Museum, and that was really cool too.
Oh, yeah.
Our next big thing that we would like to do is we'd like to go down to Galveston and see the beaches.
Nice.
We have been warned that they're not quite as cool as California beaches
Listen.
or even Florida beaches.
All these beach snobs
But-
need to just calm down. Like, the fact that we have a beach 45 of an hour or whatever away,
Well, and I keep getting warned about this awful humidity and heat, and I'm the kind of person that if it's hot outside, I want to be in water. I don't
sure.
care how warm it is.
Yeah.
I want to be in water. So
Yeah. It will, it will get hot. I can say as a northern note, same thing. It's overblown a little bit.
sure.
Now, listen, July and August, it's brutal. But the rest of the year, it's pretty manageable.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and we are, pretty blessed to live right by water.
Well,
which
and
is
being
pretty
from
cool.
Central
So-
California, I've experienced a lot of dry heat, so the
sure.
humidity thing will probably catch me off guard, but
Yeah.
the heat itself probably won't bother me.
Well, we work inside.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
Exactly.
Of
Of course, I sweat even if it's 60 degrees outside, so it doesn't matter.
So there's no change. It's all
No,
hot.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. And, I'm really glad that you're part of the team and you're
Me too.
fitting in so well. And I'm excited about what all this stuff going forward as you and I keep developing chemistry. And
Yep.
we talked about this a little bit like Sunday. You could start really feeling it click.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool to see God work those things together, and excited to see what He's going to do with one. You're super talented. One, you've got great ability and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But just watching Him work on your heart and get you to where He wants you to be. That's
Exactly.
really cool from this side of the
Yeah.
fence too.
Yeah,
And I'm really excited for where God's bringing you
for sure.
and where it's going to bring us. In that
absolutely.
meantime. So. Lots of cool things to be excited about. Lots of wins to be celebrated as
sure.
we go forward. So, yeah. Well, this has been a great win meeting.
Yes, it has been.
Yeah. So I think we can wrap this one up.
I can walk off. Yeah.
You could leave if you want to. But yeah, it's been great, and thank you for sharing. Thank you for being honest in your sharing.
Yeah.
And letting people know you a little bit. It's
Yeah,
been good.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, go team.
Go team.
Thanks so much for joining us for this Win Meeting. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Win Meeting and to subscribe to the Corona Christian Church channel on YouTube. We'd also love to hear your wins, so send us a message on our Instagram and share with us some of the ways God is winning in your life.